already pushed around the room. So I will be leading this whole conversation on leadership. What I love about this is the diversity of leaders sitting up here in front of us. So I think we'll get a great conversation and dialogue, and I think I'd love to cover the spectrum of leadership when it comes to leadership, not just within ourselves, but our organizations and our communities that we serve. So we'll engage everyone in the thought process on our panels around what leadership is really about and look at the whole spectrum. So I'm delighted to have the chance to collaborate with you guys on this. So I want to start off with kind of an opening question. And by the way, the format for this, before I jump in, is we'll have some questions and then we'll leave it open for Q&A in the last several minutes of this. So take some notes, write some things down that you have along the way that you'd like to ask the panelists, and make sure that we call those out. So, but this first opening question is your greatest leadership moment. Think in the past in your career, your life's journey, early on into actions, experiences with others, and things that you do. So, Varsha, you want to take it off? All right.
All right. Hi, guys. So I am currently the chair of the Blood Drive Committee and the Marketing Committee between the Blood Drives in Loudoun County. And it's hard to choose a defining moment just because it's been a great experience for the past 4 years. But I have to choose one. I would say last August, I found out that the youth team I was volunteering under would no longer be meeting together because the teams would be moving to the high school. And that team was just a source of so much support for me, and I would no longer have access to that support. But I just have a passion for volunteering and blood drives, and so I continued by myself with my family this past year when blood drives and marketing stands in my community. And I think that really, it was a new experience because I didn't have the help, but I found myself being more confident in myself and experiencing service on another level. So that's really
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Varsha. Okay. So, General Becker, or you said I could call you Brad, but I'll say General Becker for right now anyways. How about your leadership moment?
Well, I do have a moment, but first I'd like to say thank you to everybody here at the American Red Cross. In the 29 years I've been serving, our partnership in the Army with the American Red Cross has been so important. And I will tell you, you don't see as much of it in the news today, but we still have 178,000 soldiers for the station, 151 countries. So the support that the American Red Cross provides is so critically important. So I just want to say thank you all for having me here today, and thank you all for what you do. The moment for me was, I was a second lieutenant. It happened purely by chance. It might have been first lieutenant, purely by chance, and I'm so thankful that it happened. I was in Germany. The year was 1987. I'd been in the Army about a year and a half. And I heard through my ROTC training and through my officer basic course what an impact that leaders can have on their subordinates, on their soldiers in that case. But I really didn't understand. So I had to go in and put money in, but there was a time difference. It wasn't being able to see somebody out there at 1 o'clock. And I saw my driver, he was at the time PSC Gerald Nelson from Mississippi. He was on the phone, and I walked by, and I waved to him, and as I walked by, he pops out, hey sir, could you come here a minute? I'm talking to my mom, and I'd really like you to say hi to her. Now, a little background for those who haven't served. When a soldier gets selected to be the driver for a platoon leader, which I was, that usually means they're one of the top soldiers in the platoon. They're supported, they don't have any problems. And when I say driver leader, I'm not concerned. Go to one mission, take me out to where we go, and drive my tactical vehicle. So as I got on the phone with his mom, for the next 10 minutes, she proceeded to tell me and thank me for all I had done for her son. I was the father figure that he never had, and what an impact I had on his life. And again, I'm not saying this that Lieutenant Becker was a great lieutenant. I was probably an average lieutenant. But it really did strike me that here was a young man who worked for me for about 8 months. I hadn't had any problems. I hadn't helped him through any specific issues, marital problems, drinking problems, career problems. And yet somehow I had.
They're awesome. And it's great to see you do these leadership roles at such a young age. So for me, outside of raising 2 boys, which is always a leadership challenge every day, they're amazing. But I think for me, it was truly moving from, I was at a global multinational company went from having lots of staff and running a very large, multi-billion-dollar business to going to a company where I had to start everything from scratch. Literally educating the leadership about my market, to hiring all the people, to learning a completely new set of leadership principles and styles of executive management. And it's probably, when I look back, I will say it's been one of the most exciting yet challenging leadership times of my career. Because you really, as you grow in what you do, no matter what kind of leadership style you have, when you grow, you begin to understand that you create skills over time as you scale. And you get to a certain level and you're doing these certain roles, and all of a sudden somebody says, well, we want you to now go way back and start almost again creating something. And you task yourself in different ways, and you evaluate yourself in different ways as a leader. And what I had to go back and relearn lots of things that I had known that I'd actually forgotten. Because things like, as simple as, for a long period of time, I'd only been hiring executives. And I had to go and hire like individual line, and I said, well, what's the interview skills? Like, what do I need to ask them? What kind of talent am I looking for? How is my business going to be different here than it was previously? How do I want to set this organization up for success? And the reason I tell you that it was a challenge, it was an opportunity, I should say. It was a challenge, but it was a great opportunity, and that's the way I try to look at everything today. Like, what's the opportunity and what do you learn? And the learnings for me was that it's really good to dive deep in everything, not just be surface level, but really understand and ask the right questions and sort of challenge yourself on, are you continually thinking about how you do what you do in your team, in your organization, how you scale it? And I had to scale this on a global basis. But of everything I learned, I had to learn, when was I the leader? When was I the mentor? When was I the manager? When was I the coach? And when was I the roll the sleeves up, get the job done with the person beside me? And that's really, believe it or not, when you're running a business, you sort of step yourself back and say, well, this is my role. But when you're building a business to try to scale, you ask yourself lots of different things. And I think, hopefully, that is something that individuals can learn no matter at what level of organization you're at or how large the organization is at. Because if you're in a large order, you're trying to just build something net new or change something net new, how do you approach that? Or if you're just building something from scratch, how do you think about what role you play? And for me, it was just really different because I'd gone from something at mass scale, and I was managing and running, to something I had to just start all over again. And I had to figure out what role, who am I? And what role am I playing? And how the heck do I hire all the great people I need? And through lots of mentors and blessings, things have worked out so far, but the story hasn't ended yet.
So you really went from a large global organization to almost a startup, and so it's really that continuum that you really need to flex those different muscles, which is great for all of us in today's environment. So thank you, Teresa. So we'd love to hear from you all. How do you define leadership personally? What does that mean to you? As succinctly as you can, but can you define leadership in your heart and mind?
I think the most important aspect of leadership is fostering other people's ideas. I think when I was running the youth team in Loudoun County, the most important thing to me was listening to other people's ideas and what they wanted to do, and what they wanted to, their interests, how they wanted to see what the club was doing. I kind of look at myself as like a medium to go through. Because in the end, it's not us that's doing all the work, but it's everyone working together as a team to accomplish something bigger and make a difference in our community. And I think that's what leadership is emulating others, what they want to do, and using that to create a bigger difference.
Excellent. Thank you. Well said.
In the world I it's all about influence, and it's about the ability to get other people to do something they might not otherwise do, because if they were going to do it anyways, it doesn't require a lot of leadership. And in many cases, in doing so, it doesn't benefit them whatsoever. So it's really the ability to influence people to do what they might not otherwise do, when in some cases there's no benefit.
Right, thank you. Teresa?
I'll say two things. One concept that I've always tried to foster was one, lead from the front when you need to, be there, guide, lead, direct, have sharp elbows if you need to, be the first person to break through the glass if you need to, but stand side by side with your organization when that's what's needed, and or sort of push from the back a little bit when that's what's needed. I think that is sort of the 360 that you have to know your place and point. But the second big one is being the influencer, as you were saying, to guide that organization to where it needs to go. That organization has got to have, one, they have to believe that you can lead them, because if they don't believe that you can lead, they're not going to get behind you, with you, rally with you, fight the battles that are needed, and grow as you need to grow. So a lot of it is also that. But lastly is being humble. I think being humble and also being self-critical as a leader, to let people know you are a real individual and you're far from perfect. But that as a leader, you're there with them when you need to be with them, and you're not always just sort of dictating what needs to be done.
Right. So it's not always leading from the top, it's always leading from the center to the side to the outside to. It's clear that, General Director, we were talking about, how things have just changed so much in our environment, our society, our planet. So when we look at the context of leadership and leadership models, we what got us here isn't necessarily going to get us there. Right? So I would love to hear from you all. What do you think are the important leadership competencies or attributes in today's environment? I mean, Workforce 2020 just came out with data that said that three leadership competencies are pretty much prioritized around the planet, and that's collaboration, connection, and having a deep sense of a global, deep cultural awareness of others to inspire and motivate them to get things to do at a discretionary level. When you have a rich, diverse spectrum of people that are surrounded by you, that don't look like you, that don't talk like you, that's not always easy, right? So those are just three to kind of give an example, but I'd love to hear from you. General Director, we'll start with you first, and then kind of work from both ends. So,
going to a basic leadership tenet that I don't think has changed. The number one thing a leader's got to be able to build a team, and that was true. I'm sorry, that was true 100 years ago, and I think that's just as true today. The most effective organizations I've been associated with, the ones where leaders build a strong team. But as it relates to the current strategic environment, I think that what some of the changes that need to take place is, for years, successful organizations were the ones that could create efficiency. They were focused, they were very hierarchical, and they could create efficiency and squeeze the most out of their resources. But as the environment's changed, I think it's more about adaptability now. So leaders, where you once had a great deal of control, and leaders were often felt very comfortable being in control, have got to feel comfortable with ambiguity. They got to feel comfortable with assuming some risk and being able to identify what that risk is, or they will not be able to adapt at the rapid pace that this environment changes. So I think it's one of the biggest changes that organizations have got to take a look at is efficiency versus adaptability, and how do they become more adaptable.
thank you. Varsha?
I would definitely say an important thing for a leader to be able to do is communicate. This day and age, it's just crazy with all these technological innovations, and being able to reach out to multiple generations can be very important when you're trying to spread a message and get things done. We live in a time where the president's of Twitter. It's we have to adapt to that, and especially when you're looking at the local level, you want to get people at your events, sign up donors to come to your blood drives, and I think a great way to do that is social media right now, and also emails and all these other things, just to reach out to multiple generations and not just what we're comfortable with. And I think that's something that is constantly changing, and we have to, like you said, adapt to every day. And definitely communicating effectively is
and that globally, you have to really be aware of what's going on globally, because people move around, you hire a broad set of diversity within your organization, and you really need to understand that as a high-tech company, we hire very young individuals, and also taking time to really mentor and guide and direct in real time, I think is important, because you don't want to let individuals create sort of bad habits, that you don't spend some time just sort of gently redirecting a bit and guiding and letting them know better ways, or asking them, letting them be a little bit self-critical on, do you think that went well? How could we have done that better? And one of the principles we have, I love at Amazon, is called disagree and commit. And the disagree and commit concept can be quite challenging, yet at the same time very enlightening, because we hire really smart people who are disruptors. And when you allow someone the opportunity to have a voice that they know is going to be heard, as long as they voice their idea smartly, with data, because we're very data-driven, so if they have data and you voice it smartly, that they have a real chance that they'll be heard. And it's taken very seriously, and they are allowed to have a voice. And it can be, there's always some natural friction going on, and we like that concept. We think that keeps us as high innovators. Because if you just always get in line and you're not really questioning the status quo, you're not really disrupting. And we are big disruptors, and we're constantly questioning, are we doing things the right way? So I think, again, you have to make sure that you're listening to people's voices, because I find the best ideas come out of our really smart individuals. So it's not just about your ideas, it's about clearly listening and picking at those to really then get the best solution, and then maybe evolve that solution, because sometimes the first one out of the gate's not always the best, but you can evolve it over and over and over.
Yeah, I think listening to all voices and having all voices on deck, right? That really mirrors who we're serving in terms of our customers, our stakeholders, and those people out there in the community. So really important. This is just an ad hoc question, but I was meeting with Jeff Inlock yesterday, who's the executive officer of GE. A little music in there. And I was just asking him, how do you just deal with all the things hitting you in so many different ways now in social media and the media responses? And I always ask this question to executives and CEOs: how do you sense the future, lead in the present? And how do you deal with all the minutes you're flying at and know the priorities and establish this clarity with those that serve you, but also continue to sense the future with them? So anybody can take a stab at that one. But does anybody have any thoughts on that one?
I will take a stab at that one really quickly, because we have two other principles called think big and deliver results. And they're can be a little bit like, I have people ask me, well, are those the same? How do you deliver, think big, and how do you do that? And the concept is really built to do that, just what you said. You've got to constantly be thinking about what's out there, where's the hockey puck going? How do you innovate on behalf of your consumers, your customers? How do you think about that, and how do you do that? At the same time, when you're running a business or organization, not for profit, you have to deliver results. You have to deliver results, otherwise you won't have a business. So it's really, and I think great leaders have to do that. And that is probably, if you look at today, because technology allows you to be super, if you use it effectively, to be very competitive. But if you're not using it appropriately, you can get behind, as an example. So as a leader, you constantly have to be considering, how do I think big and drive strategically, yet constantly deliver results that I need to deliver, so I can innovate more and do more things.
I spent the last 2 years reorganizing the staff, and that was a very challenging experience, but it gets exactly what you're talking about, was how do you, because there is a level of bureaucracy just about any large organization that takes care of the day-to-day routine deliverables, whether it's the payroll or whatever, that you still got to get done. But how do you think forward? And the old way of just having really smart people at the top thinking about the future is probably not the most effective in this rapidly changing environment. So we created what we call a dual operating system. So we still have some of our traditional staff. For us, our 1 who does personnel, our 2 who does intelligence, our 3 does operations, 4 does logistics. But then we created a cross-functional staff along lines of effort to think about the future. And the important thing on that network cross-functional organization was it truly wasn't cross-functional. It wasn't stovepipe along any certain
functional areas. So they would think about the future. They would throw out things, like you said, that nobody had even thought of. And there was no, you couldn't say, well, that's a stupid idea. You had to think about it. It was a Shark Tank. And then, you know, so really what we created, and we were running an organization about 20,000 people on any given day. So this was a large organization. But we really had a dual operating system. It took about 2 years to really get up and running. That networking piece was one that really a lot of pushback, because people were very comfortable with the way we've been organized in the past, which was a very stovepipe, mechanistic type of organization.
So how do you align your human intelligence, which channels up to the right thing you need to know at the right time if going matters, right? Those networks are so critical. You know, I'd like to move it a little bit on the other side of the pendulum, and that's really about service, community service, which you all are definitely involved in. So what inspired you to get involved in community service, leadership in the community? And what do you get back from that?
So I started volunteering at a pretty young age, and I think it's really because my family instilled those values of contribution in me. When I was younger, my uncle got diagnosed with leukemia, and I just saw firsthand he was in a constant need of blood, and I saw personally what volunteers, what they can do to help. And so my mom just went ahead and looked for a Red Cross chapter, and that's how I got started. And when the first meeting, the youth coordinator just told us we need a blood drive coordinator, we need a marketing coordinator, and we just kind of got thrown into it, and we learned along the way. But it's just been an amazing experience, and because I know that it's indirectly helping the welfare of others. Like Linda Mack said, 1 pint of blood can save 3 lives. I just never get tired of it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's wonderful.
For me, it was, I don't even know that I knew that what it was volunteering. It's just sort of part of the DNA, I think, of my family. We just always were in the community helping. It was our church, or, you know, it was, I'm from a very small area in Kentucky, and you just sort of helped each other. And I think, I don't know, it's just part of who you are, and you actually don't even feel good about what you do. It's not, it's just your DNA. Like I said, it's part of who you are, and I think that it's in your heart, or you just live it. It's how you live it. And I just spent some time this week with a group out of the UK that has a mission that I thought was so great, that was about both doing sort of venture work, but they also work with a lot of families around Europe where one of the goals and missions is philanthropy, doing good things. So they're constantly, their practice was really interesting because it was a tie between sort of creating businesses, but beginning to tie back, well, how do we do that as a result of doing good? So I took them over to see a social incubator called Halcyon House in Georgetown. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a social kind of venture capital group that gets incubators thinking about social good and how they start those things. And I believe today, our young people are thinking about doing social good even through technological solutions, which is really exciting. And it can touch you every single day in what you do. But I will also just quickly say that being around the world and seeing the Red Cross work in remote areas around the world is mind-blowing. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing when you see the Red Cross in action. I mean, here, we sort of almost take them for granted, which is very sad. You never want to take your Red Cross for granted because they're always there, and that's part of who they are. But then you go around the world where there's no way to do anything except by foot in villages, and here they are with their Red Cross like logo on. They're going village to village, helping families get immunized, or bringing them food, or helping them out. And it really hits home that volunteerism is just, I mean, it's at work every single day around the world, and Red Cross is one of the key elements of really leading and driving that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Christy. You're doing all that as well. So, go ahead.
The DNA thing is my father served for 22 years in the Air Force. Well, I didn't think about much growing up. When I went to college, I joined ROTC. I didn't expect either one of my boys were going to join the military. Now I was a lieutenant, and I think so much like folks up here, I think it's in the DNA. The satisfaction you get from serving.
Part of your nervous system. You know, I think too, it's about finding the passion, experience or event that impacted you. I remember my sister up in Minnesota, 4 or 5 years ago, and we got this call from from her son, my nephew, and his apartment was burning down in Chicago. It was one of the largest apartment fires they'd had in about 10 years. You watched it on TV, turned on the news, and oh my gosh, that was Bryce's apartment burning down. And within 3 minutes, the Red Cross was there with a check for so much money. They gave him food and clothing for the next couple of years. And I said, someday, I'm going to really help out and do something to give back to the Red Cross. So I guess that's my story. But what advice do you have? I think people, generally human beings, want to connect. They want to help. But how do you take that first step forward if we don't know how to get involved or what to contribute for our time? What are some pieces of advice that you want to have there? Varsha, what do you give people in terms of advice to get involved, get out there?
I would definitely say don't be afraid, to go out and try something new. I was just thrown into, like running blood drives, and I find that was one of my biggest passions. And whatever you do, just really put your whole heart into it, because you find that when you have the best intentions, it has the best effect. And I think, looking in your community, your high school, it's definitely a good place to start when you're younger. I think just anywhere in your community, finding a place to volunteer is a good place. And, if you find yourself growing, and your opportunities growing, and...
Great, good. We're all going to come to you for that coaching and advice. General Manager, how about you?
Again, I think just be your own personal example, getting out and talking about how rewarding it is, and then others will see the passion you have and the excitement and the satisfaction, and they'll want to do the same, they want to experience the same.
Well, I would say everybody in here is already a volunteer. So we're sort of preaching to the choir, so to say. So I would say for the people who are in here, it's about inviting others to the party. Really inviting people to come share in with the activities that you're doing, showcase what you're doing. And again, if you find something that you really think has a talent for it, tell them. Build them up and say, you know what, I think you could really help with the Red Cross, whatever is your passion. But sort of build people up to let them know and understand that they have a talent that they may not be tapping into completely. And then just, giving them some ideas.
Right. And to build upon that, Tracy, within 5 years, half of our workforce in this plant will be millennials. I don't know if there's any millennials in the room. Maybe not. But, and one of their priorities is community service. Now, they are looking at future employers' websites. See not only diversity, but how they're involved and how they're giving back, and what organizations and institutions that they are supporting, and if they can align with that, right? So I think a big question here is, what advice do you have for this generation of leadership? How can we get them more involved in service? Because I think they can be a huge, huge support for us as we move the Red Cross along. So, Varsha, what would you like to say about that?
I would definitely say, being young in high school, there's a lot of pressure on us to get volunteer hours or get the best grades, and I would just definitely say forget about all that. When you have good intentions, like I was saying earlier, you'll find a really good passion. And so, yeah, definitely don't worry about, the future, worry about right now, and how you can respect this.
Be in the present, right?
Right, exactly.
Be here now.
Yeah.
I like that. Good.
Well, I think, it's about, again, how do you get people excited? It's just about really trying to tap into their passion. And if you tap into people's passion, they're going to automatically just take off. And you got to find something that they get excited about. Now, how do you get people excited? Sometimes a little bit of that is marketing and salesmanship too, because individuals can't always, they've got to be, you've got to discuss it, you've got to give them data, get them really excited about the possibilities and how they as an individual can really make a difference. And sometimes it might be a difference through a single person, a small group, a large group, a country. I mean, who knows what the possibilities are? But if you don't at least start somewhere, trying, you will know what the potential is.
Put your toe in the water. One last question here, then we'll go to questions from all of you. Think of a leader that, whether they are still living or not today or passed away, that you think that was one of the best leaders that you truly admired, and things that you might have learned from them, any particular attributes that you picked up, observed, that you've taken and perhaps integrated into your leadership? Varsha, you want to start off?
Sure. I think aside from my family, someone I really look up to is a motivational speaker, Anthony Robbins. I was introduced to him from my father, who attended a bunch of his seminars, and when I got to the age, I wanted to go to one of the seminars and try it out, and so I went to one a couple of years ago, and I think that was just one of the most life-changing moments of my life, because I was in a room with 5,000 people, and this guy was talking to us, and he made it sound like he was talking just personally to me, and he gets you in this amazing state where he has this, on the first stage, you're able to get into the state of mind where you can walk on fire, and I actually was able to walk on a path of coals. So, I just I just learned these amazing things from that 1 week, and I really look up to him, not just because I'm short.
So you have blisters on your feet now, or?
I'm
You're all good? Okay. Good.
I've been blessed to work with a lot of great leaders, but the one that probably had the most impact on me was General Ray O'Meara, who happens to be right here at the Pentagon. He's the Chief Staff of the Army. He was a battalion commander. I was one of his subordinate commanders, battery commander. I was a captain. And he showed me what investing in building the team can really do to an organization. It was by far the best organization I'd ever served in. Still is. And it wasn't that we had no talent. We probably were about the same as all the other battalions in the Army. There were thousands of them. But he spent so much time building that team into an effective team that everybody wanted to be part of and everybody was committed to. So I've always tried to model that and do something to building teams.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I have so many leaders I admire, and I think leaders all in different styles, but a couple, my father, back to you, my father took farm boys and turned them into amazing basketball players. And I just still admire, he's passed away now, and I really think about how he motivated and all he individually did for each and every one of those boys. And some of them had never even been out of the county that we lived in. And when he passed away, they lined up out the door and around, for a mile almost. And every story I heard from them was about the impact that he had made on their lives. And it was mind-blowing to me. And while I knew it and I saw it, after he passed, to hear each and every story that these young men and women who were cheerleaders or whatever, how parents, people that were involved, just talk about him, it really made me see how selfless he had been and what he had done. I know he made no money as a coach. He spent it all getting them gas money and shoes and food and everything else. I mean, it was his passion. And I think a second leader that is someone that instilled in me that I could do anything. I worked, the first tech company I worked for, the CEO was a guy by the name of Don Byrne. He probably doesn't even know this, but he gave me the confidence to do things I never thought I could do. I never worked in tech. He let me buy and sell technology applications. He would say, you can do this. He put everything in a triangle. And he would say, you can do that. You can do that. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And I'm curious by nature. I like good problems to solve. But I don't know that I would have ever been where I am today without having somebody like that really instill in me a level of confidence that I could do this. I'm a speech and language pathologist by background. I had no tech. I had some science, but no tech. And now, 18 years later, I've been working in technology for all this time. And it was really because he said, you can do that. And I love it. So,
And early on in your career,
yeah.
It's wonderful. It's a gift to have somebody who you can hang out with for a while, has a broader vision of you than you sometimes have of yourself. And yes, you can versus no, you can't. Right? That's a huge gift. So I'd like to kind of transition now, and I'm sure you all have great questions. It's a rare opportunity to tap on their knowledge and thought leadership. So I'd like to open it up to any questions from the attendees.
Our old friends, Teresa, who have you inspired today?
just today, later to me recently.
In that, from what you all have just said, how important that inspiration was to the guy who believed in you. And so is that something that all three of you all think about every day? Who am I going to be an example for? Who am I inspiring today?
Understood. Well, so I do think about that every day, and I worry about that every day, quite frankly. Each and every person on my team, each and every person that I touch, I worry, am I a good example? Have I Have I been, humble, self-critical? Have I set a good example? So I think you're constantly thinking about that. And what impacts me still today is I do skip level one-on-ones a lot with my managers or individuals. And I always try to make sure that I'm very well prepared for those meetings. So when I come in, I sort of see what they've been doing. I get a sense of, I have them write me a little note on things they would like to talk about. And I try to be very prepared. And I always try to give them something a little bit more inspiring by the time they leave. I want to just inspire them in some way based on their business. I want to get them thinking big and inspired to go to do things. And I don't know, I've had a few say, I always feel so good when I leave our one-on-ones. And that's what I want. The goal is not to beat them up, but to get them inspired to go forth and think bigger and build their businesses and do great things for their customers, which is really, really important for us to put our customers first. So I hope, I would just say I hope that I do that. It's my goal to do that, so.
I don't know, yes. Give me the mic.
Thank you. Just a quick question about social media and its impact on leadership. Social media has changed so much in what we see on a day-to-day basis. Do you think the skills or just the way leaders perform is going to change moving forward because of social media, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know in the military, one of the things that social media has changed drastically is in the past, if you were a leader in country X, Y, or Z, or any region of country X, Y, or Z, you kind of focused on what was going on there because things tend to be contained there. But now with social media, you've got to know what's going on worldwide, because what happens half the world away through social media can affect the area that you're in, within minutes. So it absolutely affects the fact that we've got to look much broader than just the area that we're operating in at that time and know those different connections and what the impact can be. We saw with the Arab Spring, which then turned into summer, fall, and another spring, and another summer. And we never could have predicted. That wouldn't have happened 20 or even 10 years ago.
I'll say agree completely. I mean, it's already changed the way leaders lead and manage, and data. I mean, you look at everything from the United Nations to the World Bank to countries. Social media is changing who votes for whom, how money gets raised, how data. Everything we do, every purchase we make, things that we, what stores we go to, what restaurants we go to, because if you're checking in and you're telling people about it, which many are, but on the data analytics, I was just in Australia, and there's a group there called the Black Dog Institute that had done this whole study on all these feeds from Twitter about mood. And around the world, they were looking just from Twitter feeds, what's the mood around the world? And they still have it up. It's amazing. And it shows by male and female around the world, day of the week, time of the day, world events, and how mood changes. And they have all these spikes. So they're even looking at things like psychological patterns, potential famine, fighting war. It's already changed. There's so much more data and information than we ever believed was possible. And then if you look at how young people talk and share, and you should talk about that. How's it changed how you guys interact day to day?
I think when used poorly, it can create just a big mess. But when it's used effectively, I think it just opens up so many new opportunities because you're reaching out to people you never would have been able to just by talking on the phone or in person. And I think that definitely helps, on the level that I contribute, because I can tell other people about my events and such. And so I think it just enables us to do to take what we know how to do and take it further.
Good. Maybe you could have a whole other practice around working with leaders on how they use social media.
That's right.
Because they need to be, I think there's a lot of teachings in how, as a leader, do you use social media yourself effectively.
Yeah, I think how do we continue to, that's right, pray, but channel it into value creation for those that we're serving. And I think that's the opportunity around the corner and now is how do we continue to create value on social media. Another question. Right over there, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to follow up a little bit more on that question about social media versus social interaction. And I think that that's something that we're really not talking about because we're driven with data, we're doing this, but what we do actually in Greg Cox is talking about the individual. And one of the things I've noticed as a DAT volunteer is that, unfortunately, I love to say the millennials are fabulous. They're great with Twittering, they're savvy in tech, but the things that we do best are working with people at their most vulnerable. And that's a skill. So could you address how we're not talking to the individual and the people, and what we need to do as leadership to get to that real core empathetic, those hard soft skills that we're really not teaching younger individuals and me as leadership because we're not valuing them.
I mean, that's a great observation. I've only been here in the National Capital Region for about a week. Before that, I was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where we trained about 45,000 soldiers a year. So in 2 years, I was able to train we trained about 90,000 soldiers. And most of those were Marines, like almost all of them were Marines. And when I would ask them at the end of 10 weeks what the most challenging part of basic combat training was, it wasn't going off the tower, crawling under a chain of fire. It was interacting with 60 other people because they lived in an open bay with bunk beds. Because they had never, although they'd been connected to thousands of people through social media and on their video games, they had never had to interact one-on-one with that many different people, and it was hugely challenging for them. But by the end of 10 weeks, they kind of worked their way through it. So, I don't know what the answer is, but I agree with you that that is a challenge that I think this next generation is going to have to deal with in trying to work through that face-to-face social interaction that they're just not as used to as well. We were because we had no other choice.
And don't you think there's a little bit of the pendulum shifting though around the virtual office setting, and I think people are finding they need to connect to a certain degree. I'm seeing some of the virtual moving back to offices or making more intentional action to bring people in to have that heart-to-heart conversation. And I don't know if you guys, if that's a trend that you're seeing out there, or Teresa, what about at Amazon?
Yeah, we actually use, because we are a global company and a global team, so we use a lot of VTC interaction, and we do, of course, audio, video, Skype. People still use a lot of things, like I was just in Brazil and everybody had downloaded WhatsApp. And I couldn't believe it. So sort of where you go around the world, there's different kinds of ways. But based on what you just said, I think you can do two things. One is modeling in schools. At this level, we have to get teachers, and I run our education group as well. And I think you've got to get teachers and professors really tuned in to how do they use social media in the classroom with the families. How do they make it work? And I think it's such a new thing still, even though it's new. It's not been integrated into curriculum, I think, in the ways it should be. But how to use it with and for curriculum, and how do you also teach etiquette and behavior in positive ways or negative things that could be taken with social media. And you're seeing a lot more of it today. But I'm going to tell a very, very quick story. I did a panel at the University of Florida about a year ago, and it was on networking. It was with MBA students. And I went in, I did something very intentional. I walked in, they knew who I was. I had my name up, I took my computer in, and I sat down and I put my computer up and started working. And I waited, and all these students came in. There's 250 of them. And there was one young Chinese woman that came up to me and said, "Excuse me," gave me her card, and said, "May I talk to you?" And I said, "Absolutely." So we chatted. And by the way, she's at Amazon today. She's at Amazon to chat. But she said to me, "I'm really interested in Amazon." She had a great dog. She was the only person that said anything to me. And so the forum started, and we went and introduced ourselves, and I sort of jokingly said, "You've all failed my test except one." And they went, and I said, "This is a networking panel, and no one came up to network with me. I came in here 30 minutes early. I was sitting here, I was busy, but it was a networking, and we got into a rich dialogue about, they all said, they didn't have the comfort skills they needed to really interact and do things like you would generally in a network. How do you go to a reception? What questions do you ask when you get there? Those kinds of things I think still need to be, make sure we're teaching about interaction, entrepreneurship that way.
It's a good practical example of that. Do you have time for one more question? Other questions? Right here. Can we get a motion?
We've spoken a lot about and that introverted type of behavior that they started to exhibit because of social media. How do we make our group, the American Red Cross, relevant to them, but also maintain their attention and enhance their experience in it, because it's such a competitive environment to keep them engaged? How do we maintain that throughout our servitude?
I definitely think social media is great when you're reaching out to people, but it can't be the only way of connecting with others. So I think it's a great way to let other people know about what you're doing and inviting people to come, like right now, talk to you guys. So I think what we have to do is just create more events where we can talk to just know what other people are thinking about, what they're passionate about, and how we can get their input on what we can do. When I was volunteering with the youth team, every meeting was very productive. We were listening to others' interests, what they wanted to see the club do, and I think that's what more of what we need to do, and just using social media to make that happen, but not making that the sole way of getting things done.
What is maybe having a curated dialogue like you're doing today with young panelists and all that social media curated? You know, things that where they like to be seen at there, but in a curated way that talks about the positive aspects of what they're doing. And I also think creating forums where they can show badging. Badging is sort of a big thing with a lot of the young people now, and where they can earn kind of badges for things that they've done and showcase that in a special way. They're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, sort of earning things that, and then they can create online clubs and consortiums. So I think there are a variety of ways, but I think sort of curated environments for them are a little bit safer using social media from that perspective.
Great, Teresa, all of you. I think that conversation is a big one that's going to be to continue, I think, as we move along here. So I hope in closing here, kind of stay on the agenda, that you've got some kernels of wisdom or new insights, and you all are leaders in your own right, and we appreciate so much you've done for the Red Cross, and you all hopefully will continue to write your story here at the Red Cross, and look forward to more of you being here and being a part of our leadership community. So, Teresa, Varsha, back